The BYU Cougars are 1-0 on the season after demolishing Central Arkansas, and Egor Demin absolutely shined on opening night. We're also talking BYU football. The initial college football playoff rankings are out, and essentially the committee gave BYU their marching orders. We'll discuss both of those topics on a combined postcast.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. This is a special edition postcast looking back at BYU's opening night win over Central Arkansas in basketball. And all I got to say right out of the chute is that Kevin Young, he has got himself an absolute squad. Now, I acknowledge it's Central Arkansas. We are still months away from BYU taking on the best and the brightest of the Big 12 in conference play. But for one night, BYU absolutely shined. 88-50 was your final. And the guy who stole the show, the freshman himself, the guy who's projected top 10 pick in the NBA draft next year, Egor Demin, 18 points, 11 assists, 4 rebounds, just absolutely 4 steals as well. This is absolutely insane. Now, BYU Game Notes did note mid-game when he got to that 11th assist, it is the most assists by any BYU basketball player in program history in their debut. He has a record. He set it on opening night of his true freshman year. This kid, folks, enjoy him while he's in Provo because it doesn't feel like it's going to be very long if this holds up. The other thing about it is it didn't even take a lot from take away from a lot of other guys. I saw Cannon Catchings absolutely shine as well in his role. 17 points. He was 4-11 from the field, 4-11 from 3, 6-13 overall. He was showing off his shooting prowess. Richie Saunders, much like we talked about with the exhibition game, showing off his ability on the offensive end to assert himself more now. He had 16 points. Everything BYU tried in this game worked. And yes, Central Arkansas, the Bears, they were overmatched in this one. There's just no if, and, or but about it. But you saw BYU's best players come out to play and show out on opening night. We talked about Mihailo Boskovic on our special edition the other night, revealing that he had officially been cleared to play for BYU right away. He was eligible according to the NCAA. He responds with 11 points, 5 of 7 shooting in his debut, 1 of 3 from the beyond the arc. You look at all of the stats here for BYU, and everybody you would have wanted to show out did so. Keba Keita, 6 points, 10 rebounds. That's exactly what you wanted, and crazily enough, they didn't have to rely on him a lot in the second half after he picked up foul trouble with his 3rd foul in the first half there. So it was a really, really impressive night for BYU and exactly what you hope for the Cougars in opening night action. Now, obviously, they will have better games ahead because, as I mentioned, the Big 12 slate is going to test BYU severely. UC Riverside, who comes to Provo on Friday night, they're going to be much like Central Arkansas. You'll probably see a bunch of guys go off for big numbers in this one. But the other thing about this is, and I really appreciated what Jimmer Fredette and I believe it was Blaine Fowler also said late in this contest. Remember, there was about 5 minutes to go, and the game's well within hand for BYU. But Central Arkansas had gone to a zone defense, and Kevin Young kept his guys in there. He left his starters out there, and as Blaine, I think, pointed out, they were trying to get a look at what BYU's sets could do against a zone defense. It was trial and error time. Kevin Young is a guy who's going to tinker to make sure that all of his sets, everything he has drawn up for his team, work against whatever they may see at any point this season. That was a great opportunity, even though it was absolute garbage time, to get a look at how the offense ran against the zone defense. I actually think it was absolutely brilliant for them to point that out on the broadcast, but more importantly, brilliant that Kevin Young decided to try that, because a lot of coaches, when you're up 30 plus points, what do you yank their guys, said, hey, have a seat, guys. We're going to put the scrubs in and let them finish this out. And eventually they got to that. But the bigger point to be made here is BYU is an absolute wagon, and they're going to be a wagon for most of the season when it comes to their ability to steamroll some of these opponents. I fully expect BYU to make it through the non-conference slate with maybe 1, 2 losses overall. Now they're playing a very home-heavy schedule, as you might imagine, and playing a bunch of teams that are coming and getting a check for coming to the Marriott Center to play BYU. But it's going to be a really fun time to watch how this team kind of morphs into what Kevin Young ultimately envisions for it. I'm still questioning what the ultimate rotation will look like for BYU because I just don't think you can play a 10, 11, 12-man rotation and really expect it's going to be successful against a Big 12 schedule. But maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe Kevin Young is going to break the mold and really show that he can do things that other coaches simply can't do. We have seen him be an absolute magician with regards to his ability to recruit high-level talent to Provo, Utah. Most recently, Xavier Staten announcing his commitment as a 4-star talent. Egor Demin was a 5-star talent. That's not Richie Saunders. Who am I thinking of? Elijah Crawford, a 4-star talent. You also saw Cannon Catchings, a 4-star talent in his own right. These guys all have shown the ability to really contribute at a high level. The only guy I was disappointed by in terms of opening night, quite literally, was Dawson Baker. 0-7 from the field, 0-6 from 3, just 1 of 2 on his free throws, and only 1 assist. That was his stat line in 17 minutes. You want to see more from a guy like Dawson Baker because he's a bona fide bucket getter. At least he was when he was playing down there in the Big West for, it was UC Irvine. Yeah, it was Irvine. He was an anteater. You want to see this is a kid who was an all-conference player in the Big West level. You want to see a better performance from him, and I expect that he will bounce back emphatically, hopefully as soon as Friday night when they take on UC Riverside. But for game 1, absolutely awesome to see BYU go out there and do their thing, and Cougars are 1-0, and Kevin Young already showing what he's capable of, but more importantly, his 2-star freshmen, the guys that are projected as first-round draft picks in next year's NBA draft, Egor Demin and Cannon Catchings, absolutely looked the part for opening night. So congratulations to the Cougars on that. Now, we're going to talk some BYU football as well, because it feels like there needs to be a little bit of an address of what the College Football Playoff Committee is thinking / saying and which body part they happen to be talking out of when they talk about BYU. And we'll dig into that momentarily right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys to have some fun no matter what season it is. The NFL season ongoing, obviously. A lot of us are into the NBA, college hoops, college football. Whatever you're into, FanDuel is here for you guys. You got a really simple and easy-to-use app, and the best part is you can go on the same page that you're placing your bets on. You can see all the stats, live play-by-plays. You're not missing anything when you're placing that bet. When you get I guess I call it a hunch in the middle of a game. You can take advantage of all of it with our friends over at FanDuel. And right now you can get started with $150 in bonus bets. If your first $5 bet wins, you place a $5 bet. If it hits, $150 to play with is yours. It's put into your account immediately by our friends at FanDuel. So go to FanDuel.com to get started today. That's FanDuel.com, as they are an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for being with us. All right, so BYU football got some up and down news. Now, the good news from the initial college football playoff rankings is BYU has work to do. They were ranked 9th in the initial CFP rankings, so matching their rankings in the AP and coaches polls as of this past week. But as the highest rated Big 12 team in the CFP rankings, the Cougars were the 4 seed and therefore were slated to play in the Fiesta Bowl and obviously have a first round bye in the college football playoff. That's the good news for BYU, is they are the top dog in the Big 12 according to the committee. The issue I take, and the issue I think a lot of people out there took, is the fact that the ACC projected leader in Miami somehow is ranked 4th. And there was a whole thing about Ward Manuel, the committee chair, saying that the eyeball test is what we're looking at. He was saying that about Miami. He said it about Indiana, who is inexplicably ahead of BYU despite having not played a single team who is bowl eligible yet. Now, that will change for Indiana in a couple of weeks. They will take on Ohio State. So that's not going to hold true for long. But the strength of schedule for Indiana is 103rd. And the things that Ward Manuel and the committee say match up exactly what happened to BYU in 2020. Remember when they made that incredible run and the committee came back and said, well, we have strength of schedule concerns about BYU because they're beating up on a bunch of lesser than opponents. What the heck is Indiana doing? I don't mean to make this a bash session on the college football playoff committee, but you can't talk out of two ends of your body use that expression when it comes to Ward Manuel and expect us to believe that. The other thing about this is they said this about Indiana. We had to give the answer. We gave the answer to the deliberation that we had. The strength of schedule was not very high in comparison to some others, speaking of Indiana, but the way that they have played in those games and the dominance they have shown in those games, winning by an average of 33 points, has been really impressive to the committee. So we couldn't ignore that, unquote. Okay. That means the BYU Kalani Sitake, you got to take off the nice guy thing. You have to go out there and absolutely curb stomp people. You get an opportunity to run Utah off the field on their home field this coming Saturday, you got to do it. Because if you're going to believe what the college football committee here is saying, the CFP committee is going to say here, then you have to run it up on people. And I know that's loathsome to Kalani Sitake. He's a guy who wants to win with class. He likes to obviously make sure that he doesn't embarrass people. But if what Ward Manuel is saying here is true, therefore BYU has no choice but to run it up if they really want to move up in these national rankings. I still believe BYU, so long as they handle their business and keep winning, the committee will be literally forced to move BYU up in the rankings just simply due to the fact that there are teams that are going to lose around them. It's just part of the nature of college football here. Now, if BYU loses, well, considering they were 9th, that could move them down the poll really, really quick. I feel like the Big 12 absolutely got disrespected in this initial rankings. The good news is it's just the first iteration of this. We will see, I think, 3 or 4 of these leading up to the final rankings ahead of the college football playoff field being set in early December. But it's not a good look for the committee, and it's not a good feeling if you're a Big 12 fan to watch BYU, who's perfect on the season, 8-0, but they're getting passed up by other teams, including Indiana. And once again, Indiana, absolutely boat racing teams. But when BYU, I think it was Shahan J. Araja from CBS Sports pointed out that BYU has 2 CFP top 25 wins over obviously Kansas State and SMU. I think they were 19 and 21 respectively, if I recall correctly. Those 2 top 25 wins outdo the 4 teams directly in front of BYU in the rankings combined. There is 1 combined top 25 win, and that includes the likes of Texas, etc., in those rankings. So once again, this is more of the same for BYU. There is a built-in bias with this national playoff committee. It's just a simple fact of life. They have got their marching orders, and obviously the Big Ten and the SEC are going to throw their weight around. And apparently the ACC with Miami, who has escaped multiple times this season, if you're going to hold BYU's Oregon State game against them, how in the world does the Cal game not get held against Miami to a larger degree? It's another argument to be made there. So all I'm going to say for BYU football right now when it comes to these playoff committee rankings is it's the first ranking. So don't overreact too highly to it. Maybe I have overreacted too much to it. But the bigger point to be made is there is still time for BYU to go out and impress folks. But essentially the marching orders, if you want to believe what Ward Manuel is saying here, is BYU has to pass the quote-unquote eye test, and that means you got to go boat race teams. Now, you got some tougher games, obviously, upcoming. You got Utah this Saturday. Kansas comes to Provo a week from Saturday. You have to go to Arizona State, and you finish up against the resurgent Houston team. So they're not absolute dogs that BYU is playing down the stretch here, but they're also teams that BYU gets a chance, blow them away. If what has been said is to be held as truth, and BYU wants to move up, do what these other teams are doing and absolutely obliterate these teams, run them off the field, embarrass them, and leave, as Coach Yost said in Remember the Titans, leave no doubt. That's all I can really take away from this. So once again, I think that the playoff committee is talking out of 2 sides of their mouth, if not 2 sides of their body, but the good news is the Cougars have a chance to move up, and obviously they will have to go out there and prove it, and hopefully as soon as this Saturday when they take on the Utes. Now, coming up tomorrow, we did a special crossover edition with Drake Toll from Locked On Big 12 talking about BYU and Utah. Coming up on Thursday, you're going to hear from JT Wistersill, host of Locked On Utes. He'll be with myself in another crossover edition. And then Friday, obviously, we'll do our full preview of BYU and Utah, getting you ready for that game on Saturday night. So we got a lot of content coming your way. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen to the day. Weigh in with your thoughts. Drop your comments in the notes below. Send them in via social media. Email the show, lockedonbyu@gmail.com. It's a great way to reach out as well. Let us know your thoughts. But I really do think the playoff committee, they're trying to stump for the the big dogs, but also are disrespecting BYU at the same time. But the good news is if they're going to be believed as to how they're going to rate things, BYU knows exactly how they can fix that. So as always, once again, thank you for checking out Locked On Cougars and being everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.